I had a feeling something was off that night. Sure, I've had feelings before, like when I sense Henry's about to open a fresh bag of my favorite kibble, or when he's about to settle on the couch with that gigantic burrito he never wants to share. But this was different. You could say it was primal. Henry was asleep on the couch, his socked feet dangling off the edge, and I was stretched out on the rug, lost in dreams of chasing pigeons and winning. But suddenly, my ears perked up. My bulldog intuition told me someone, somewhere, was up to no good. I gave Henry my best wake-up stare. Of course, he didn't notice. Humans are dense like that. I trotted over to Henry, nudging his leg with my nose, huffing and puffing to get his attention. He finally opened one eye, giving me a tired, slightly annoyed look. "Frank, buddy, it's 2 a.m. Go back to bed," he mumbled, half asleep. But this wasn't about me. No, sir. There was something lurking out there in Brooklyn's murky shadows, and I wasn't about to let it go unnoticed. So I decided to use my secret weapon, the whimper. Now, the whimper is a carefully crafted art, honed over years of guilt-tripping Henry into sharing his pizza crusts. I whined, low and insistent, until he groaned, threw on a hoodie, and grabbed my leash. As we stepped outside, I felt my bulldog senses tingling. Brooklyn was still, save for a few flickering streetlights and the distant hum of traffic. I held my head high, scanning the dark alleys and sidewalks for any sign of trouble. Henry, meanwhile, was yawning like he was about to go back to sleep right there on the stoop. We made our way down the block, and I could feel the tension growing. Henry thought this was just another midnight walk, but I knew better. I kept my pace steady, occasionally glancing over my shoulder, acting like I was simply interested in a lamppost or two. Secretly, though, I was on high alert. My nose was working overtime, picking up every scent, every whisper of danger on the breeze. And then I saw them, 2 shady-looking figures lurking by the entrance to a narrow alley. They weren't just your average late-night walkers. Oh no, these guys had trouble written all over them. Henry was oblivious, checking his phone while I stared daggers in their direction. I let out a low growl, just loud enough to signal my displeasure. Henry looked down at me, confused, and I swear I almost rolled my eyes. How could he not sense the danger? Just as I started barking, a quick, sharp warning to let these 2 know I wasn't having any funny business, Henry finally seemed to notice the pair. One of them took a step toward us, flashing a grin that didn't look friendly at all. I may be short, stout, and not exactly the picture of intimidation, but when I need to, I can let out a bark that would rattle the windows. And that's exactly what I did. I let out a deep, resounding bark that echoed down the street, waking up every sleeping soul within earshot. Henry froze, looking at me like I'd lost my mind, but I kept barking. One of the guys sneered at us. "What's this little guy gonna do, huh?" he taunted, looking at me like I was just some harmless lapdog. That was his first mistake. He clearly didn't know he was messing with a Brooklyn bulldog. Henry, bless his clueless heart, finally caught on that we were in a bit of a predicament. He stammered, trying to come up with something to say, but I'd already taken matters into my own paws. I lunged forward, barking louder than ever, a wall of pure, furious bulldog determination. I could tell they were startled. I mean, who wouldn't be? I may be compact, but I'm mighty. Thanks to my racket, lights started flicking on in apartment windows, and people began peering out, curious about the commotion. The guys looked nervous now, casting glances up and down the street. I could almost feel their resolve crumbling as I continued my relentless barking. More windows opened, and one by one people started shouting out into the street. A couple of them even leaned out and yelled, "Hey, leave the dog alone!" I grinned inside. Finally, my people had come through. Henry, now fully awake and realizing the danger, tightened his grip on my leash and backed us up, eyes locked on the would-be robbers. The 2 guys looked at each other, clearly debating if this whole thing was worth it. They must have realized it wasn't because, just like that, they turned and bolted down the alley, disappearing into the shadows. Henry looked down at me, his expression somewhere between relief and amazement. "Frank, you actually scared them off," he muttered, almost in disbelief. I just gave him a smug little look. Of course I did. I'm Frank, the fiercest bulldog in Brooklyn. With the danger gone, Henry knelt down beside me, scratching behind my ears and murmuring words of gratitude. He was still a little shaken up, but I could tell he was grateful. Grateful for me, his loyal protector, the one who'd saved him from an encounter that could have gone south fast. I puffed up with pride. Being a bulldog in Brooklyn isn't just about looking tough. It's about knowing when to step up and defend your turf, even if your human has no idea what's going on half the time. We walked back home in silence, Henry keeping a hand on my back, as if I'd somehow become his lucky charm. I held my head high, my bulldog chest puffed out, feeling like a hero. We might not always see eye to eye on everything, but that night, Henry knew he could count on me. And that's what mattered. The next morning, word had spread through the neighborhood. Henry was chatting with a few neighbors, and I overheard him bragging about how I'd saved his life. Well, technically true, though I could tell he was embellishing. He claimed I'd thrown myself at the robbers, which was a bit of a stretch, but hey, I wasn't going to correct him. I just strutted around, wagging my tail as if to say, yes, it's all true. I'm the hero of the block. People came up to pet me, scratching behind my ears and telling me what a brave boy I was. Even Henry bought me a new toy, a squeaky bone of all things. Not exactly the reward I'd envisioned, but hey, I'll take what I can get. Life as a hero had its perks. That night, as I curled up on my favorite spot on the rug, I thought back on the whole ordeal. I realized something. Being a dog isn't always about chasing your tail or begging for scraps. Sometimes, it's about being there for the people who need you most, even if they don't always realize it. Henry may not always understand me, and he might never learn to share his burritos, but he's my human, and I'll protect him no matter what. After all, what's a little late-night heroism between friends? In the days that followed, I noticed something peculiar. People seemed to look at me differently. It wasn't just the neighbors either. Even strangers on the street gave me that look, like they knew I was the fearless protector of Brooklyn, the bulldog who'd taken on the city's nighttime menace and come out on top. I won't lie. It felt good. Real good. I held my head a little higher, walked with an extra bounce in my step. After all, a hero's got to look the part, right? Henry even introduced me to a couple of his friends from work, which never usually happens. They looked at me, gave me a pat, and I could tell they were impressed. "So this is Frank, the brave one, huh?" one of them said. I just gave a low growl of acknowledgement, a way of saying, "Yes, you've heard correctly." Henry laughed, but I could tell he was proud. I was officially his loyal, crime-fighting sidekick, and I was loving every second of it. A few nights later, things were back to normal, or so I thought. Henry was getting ready for bed, and I was already sprawled out, half asleep, dreaming of tennis balls and bacon strips. But just as my eyelids were getting heavy, I caught a whiff of something strange outside the apartment door. My ears perked up, and I lifted my head, sniffing the air carefully. It was faint, but unmistakable, the scent of someone lurking just outside. I let out a low growl, my instincts kicking in. Was it those two guys from before, coming back for revenge? Or maybe just another random stranger, unaware they were treading on a bulldog's territory? I didn't know, and frankly, I didn't care. Whoever it was, they were about to get a loud reminder that Frank, the defender of Brooklyn, didn't take nights off. I padded over to the door and let out a single powerful bark. I heard a muffled gasp on the other side, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps retreating down the hall. I grinned to myself, pleased. Sometimes, it doesn't take a full confrontation, just a reminder of who's in charge around here. Henry came out of the bedroom, looking at me with a mix of exasperation and admiration. "Another one, Frank? You're not letting anyone off easy these days, huh?" I gave him a knowing look. He'd never understand the burden of constant vigilance, but that's what makes me who I am. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I may not have been chasing the glory, but there was a part of me that took pride in knowing I'd protected my little corner of the city. Sure, I was just one bulldog, one short, stocky, slightly grumpy dog with a knack for picking up trouble from a mile away. But to Henry, I was a hero. And to me, well, that was all that mattered. Life as Frank, the bulldog of Brooklyn, wasn't easy. But as long as I had Henry by my side and my nose to the ground, I was ready for whatever the night would throw at us next.